Dr. Rebecca Walsh's hands shook as she stared at her computer screen. The numbers didn't make sense. 3 kilometers below the Antarctic ice, her drill had just punched through into empty space. Not rock. Not more ice. Nothing. Kevin, come look at this. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Kevin Brooks rolled his chair over, coffee cup in hand. He was young, barely out of grad school, but sharp. When he saw the readings, the cup froze halfway to his lips. That's impossible, he whispered. The readings show we just dropped 3 meters through air? Rebecca ran the scan again. Same result. Somewhere deep beneath the oldest ice on Earth, there was a hollow space the size of a football stadium. A void that had no right to exist. She'd been running climate samples in Queen Maud Land for 6 weeks. Boring, routine work. Taking ice cores, measuring carbon levels, adding another drop of data to humanity's understanding of climate change. The kind of research that made her parents ask when she was going to do something exciting with her life. Well, this was exciting. It started 3 days ago. Satellite images showing geometric patterns in the ice. Perfect lines and angles where nature only made curves and chaos. At first, everyone thought it was a glitch. Satellites malfunction all the time in polar regions. But then a second satellite confirmed it. Then a third. That's when the military showed up. Commander Patrick Hayes arrived yesterday with 12 soldiers. Well, for a climate research station in the middle of nowhere. He said they were just security, standard procedure for unusual findings. But Rebecca had seen the way he looked at their equipment, heard him on encrypted calls he thought no one else could hear. The government knew something. Or suspected something. Now Hayes stood behind her, close enough that she could smell gun oil and cold weather gear. His hand rested on his sidearm, fingers tapping in nervous rhythm. What did you find? He asked. A cavity. A big one. 3 kilometers down. How big? Rebecca pulled up the imaging software. The screen filled with a wireframe map of the space below. Hayes leaned in and she heard his breath catch. That's not natural, he said. No sir, it's not. The cavity was perfectly oval, walls smooth as glass. The ice around it wasn't layered like normal glacial formation. It looked grown, arranged in crystalline patterns that repeated with mathematical precision. Someone had built this. Hidden something down there. But who? And when? Kevin was already pulling on his thermal gear. We have to go down there. Negative. Hayes's voice could have cut steel. We wait for orders from Commander. Rebecca stood up, meeting his eyes. With respect, I'm the lead scientist on this expedition. That's my discovery down there. I'm going. For a moment she thought he might physically stop her. His jaw worked, muscles tensing. Then his radio crackled. Sir, we've got a problem. One of his soldiers, voice tight with stress. All communications just went dark. Satellite link, radio, even the hard line to McMurdo Station. Everything. Hayes grabbed the radio. When? 90 seconds ago. Complete blackout. The room went quiet. Research stations didn't lose all communications at once. Systems had backups, redundancies. Unless something was jamming them. Or something didn't want them calling for help. Rebecca looked at the screen showing the cavity below. As she watched, the temperature readings started climbing. 15 degrees warmer in the last 2 minutes. Heat was radiating from whatever was down there. It was waking up. I'm going, she said again. You can shoot me or you can help me. Your choice. Hayes stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded to his men. Gear up. We all go. 20 minutes later, Rebecca was descending into darkness on a cable line, Kevin right beside her. Their headlamps cut narrow beams through black ice that had been frozen since before humans built their first cities. The walls around them glittered with trapped air bubbles, each one a tiny time capsule from Earth's distant past. Rebecca had done hundreds of descents like this. Ice was her world, familiar as her own heartbeat. But this felt different. Wrong. The temperature kept rising. At 2 kilometers down, it was warm enough that she could see her breath misting in the light. Ice this deep should be cold enough to shatter steel. Then the ice ended. Her boots dangled over empty air. Below her, the cavity opened like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. And sitting at the bottom, half buried in the cavern floor, was something that made Rebecca's scientific mind stutter to a halt. A ship. Not a boat. Not a submarine. A ship from somewhere else, made of metal that swallowed their headlamp beams instead of reflecting them. The hull curved in ways that hurt to look at, geometries that didn't quite fit together right. And covering every surface were symbols that seemed to shift and move when she wasn't looking directly at them. My God, Kevin breathed beside her. They descended the final 100 meters in silence. Rebecca's magnetic boots clanged against the hull, and she felt warmth through the soles. The metal was alive somehow, pulsing with energy that made her fillings ache. Kevin ran his scanner across the surface. "Beck, this material? It's not in any database. It's absorbing radiation across every spectrum. Radio, microwave, visible light, everything." Rebecca pulled out her camera and started photographing the symbols. They ran in bands around the hull, repeating every 30 meters. Mathematical sequences she almost recognized, like looking at her own handwriting from 10 years ago. Her camera flashed. The symbols changed. Rebecca blinked, sure she'd imagined it. But no, the patterns had shifted, rearranged themselves into a new configuration. And as she watched, a line appeared in the hull. A seam, widening, becoming a doorway 20 feet tall. Light spilled out. Golden, ancient, warm as summer sun. It illuminated the ice cavern in colors Rebecca had never seen before, shades that existed somewhere between yellow and something her eyes couldn't quite process. "Don't." Kevin's hand grabbed her arm. "We don't know what's in there." But Rebecca could already see. Shapes moving in that impossible light. Figures, human-shaped but wrong somehow, walking toward them. Her radio crackled with static. Hayes's voice broke through, barely audible. "Get out now. The ice is fracturing the hole." The transmission died in a squeal of white noise. From inside the ship, someone stepped into the doorway. A woman, or something that looked like a woman. Dark skin, eyes that held too much knowledge, dressed in clothes that belonged to no culture Rebecca had ever studied. The woman's mouth moved. The words that came out were in a language Rebecca had never heard, syllables that predated human speech. But somehow, impossibly, she understood them. "You're too early. You weren't supposed to find us for another 50 years. The woman's face filled with fear. "They're still hunting us. And now they'll know we're here." The ship's system screamed to life around them. Lights blazed in the darkness. The ice above began to crack with sounds like thunder. Rebecca felt the hull shift beneath her boots as the ship started to rise. And somewhere far above, Research Station Alpha 7 was tearing itself apart. The world flipped sideways. Rebecca's stomach lurched as gravity stopped making sense. 1 second she was standing on the hull, the next she was hanging by her magnetic boots while everything around her went crazy. Ice exploded above them. Chunks the size of houses broke free and tumbled past, missing her by inches. Through the chaos, she could see Research Station Alpha 7 coming apart at the seams. The buildings she'd lived in for 6 weeks were ripping away from their foundations, metal screaming as the ship punched upward through 3 kilometers of ice. "Kevin," she screamed. He was sliding. His magnetic boots had lost their grip, and he was tumbling toward the edge of the hull, toward a fall that would turn him into paste on the cavern floor below. A hand shot out and grabbed him. The woman from the doorway held Kevin with one arm like he weighed nothing. Her other hand gestured frantically at Rebecca. "Inside. Now." Rebecca didn't think. She just moved, pulling herself hand over hand toward the doorway as the hull bucked beneath her like a living thing. Behind her, she heard men shouting. Hayes and his soldiers, somewhere up on the ice, watching their world literally fall apart. Then she was through the door, and it sealed behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. The noise stopped. The shaking stopped. Everything went quiet except for Rebecca's ragged breathing. She looked around and her brain refused to process what she was seeing. The ship was bigger on the inside. Not a little bigger. Impossibly bigger. The corridor stretched away in front of her for what looked like miles, walls glowing with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The space was easily 10 times larger than the ship's exterior dimensions. "That's not possible," Kevin whispered beside her. The woman released him and pressed her palm against the wall. Symbols lit up under her hand, the same shifting patterns from the hull. When she spoke, it was in perfect English now, though her accent belonged to no place on Earth. "My name is Kara. You need to help me stop the others from waking up." "Others?" Rebecca managed to get the word out. Kara gestured down the corridor. "Come. Quickly. We don't have much time." They followed her through passages that seemed to rearrange themselves as they walked. Rebecca's sense of direction was completely shot. They should have been moving deeper into the ship, but somehow they kept passing windows that showed the outside world. Antarctica was falling away below them. They were rising into the sky. Then they entered a chamber that made Rebecca's knees go weak. It was vast. A space that could have held a cathedral, lined floor to ceiling with crystalline tubes. Thousands of them. And inside each tube was a person. Not aliens. Humans. But something about them was off. Their proportions were slightly different, their features subtly evolved. They wore clothes that looked like a weird mix of ancient robes and futuristic armor. And every single one of them was suspended in golden light, perfectly still. "They're alive," Kevin said, running his scanner over the nearest tube. His voice shook. "Vital signs are there, just incredibly slow. Like they're barely breathing." Rebecca moved deeper into the chamber, drawn by a pull she couldn't explain. Row after row of sleeping faces. Some looked peaceful. Others looked terrified, frozen mid-scream. Then she saw one she recognized. Tube 247. The number was etched in symbols at the base. And inside was Dr. Nathan Cole, her mentor. The man who'd taught her everything she knew about glaciology. The man who died 5 years ago on an Arctic expedition, his body lost in a crevasse, never recovered. But here he was. Older than she remembered, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. And his eyes were open, looking right at her, seeing her. "Nathan." Her hand touched the crystal surface. "Don't." Kara lunged forward. Too late. The tube began to warm under Rebecca's palm. The golden light brightened, swirling faster. Nathan's chest rose with a sudden deep breath. Across the chamber, Kevin had wandered to another section. Curious, always too curious, he'd reached out to touch a different tube. It started glowing too. "No." Kara grabbed his wrist, yanked him back. "You don't understand what you've done. We're not supposed to wake until humanity is ready. Until you've developed the technology to help us fight." "Fight what?" Rebecca demanded. Her hand was still on Nathan's tube. She could feel his heartbeat through the crystal, getting faster. Kara turned to her, and for the first time Rebecca saw real terror in the woman's eyes. The convergence. The thing that destroyed our world. The thing we fled backward through time to escape. The ship lurched. Rebecca grabbed a support beam to stay upright. Through the chamber's viewports, she could see Antarctica spreading out below them. The research station was gone. Just a crater in the ice where it used to be. She could see tiny figures on an ice shelf, probably Hayes and his team, staring up at them. "Backward through time?" Kevin's voice cracked. "You're from the future?" 50,000 years in your future," Kara said. She was working frantically at a control panel, fingers flying over symbols that meant nothing to Rebecca. "We're refugees. The last 10,000 humans. This ship is a lifeboat hidden in your past, waiting until your civilization was advanced enough to understand what we are." More tubes started warming. One by one, the golden lights intensified. People were waking up. "But you've activated the ship's systems too early," Kara continued. Her hands were shaking now. "You've sent out a temporal signature. A signal that ripples through time itself." "A signal to what?" Rebecca asked, though part of her already knew the answer. The ship stopped rising. They hung in the sky above Antarctica, suspended like a spider on an invisible thread. Every viewport in the chamber activated at once, showing the same impossible image. Their beautiful blue Earth. But it was changing. The continents were moving, sliding across the surface like pieces of a puzzle being rearranged. Oceans boiled and froze and boiled again. The whole planet was flickering between different states, different timelines, all of them wrong. Blood started running from Kara's nose. Bright red against her dark skin. She wiped it away with a trembling hand. "It's here," she whispered. "The convergence found us." It followed the signal. The tube holding Nathan Cole shattered. Crystal fragments scattered across the floor like diamonds. Nathan stumbled forward, gasping, his body remembering how to breathe. He looked around with wild eyes, taking in the chamber, the other waking sleepers, the impossible view through the windows. Then his eyes found Rebecca, and they filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he choked out. His voice was rough and used for years. He grabbed her shoulders. "I've been waiting so long. 5 years in that tube, aware but unable to move. Waiting for you to find me. Waiting for the right moment." "What are you talking about?" Rebecca tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "You need to understand what's coming," Nathan said. His grip was desperate, painful. "This isn't a war. This isn't an invasion. The convergence doesn't attack. It doesn't destroy. Then what does it do?" Nathan looked at the viewports, at Earth rewriting itself below them. When he spoke, his voice was hollow with despair. "It erases. It makes things never have existed in the first place. It's unwriting reality, Rebecca. And it's starting with this timeline. It's making sure it gets born by destroying everything that came before it." The ship shuddered. Another section of hull simply vanished, along with the 3 people standing near it. Rebecca watched them blink out of existence like candle flames. And the worst part was, the people around her didn't react. Didn't scream. didn't even notice. Because they couldn't remember the missing people had ever existed. But Rebecca could. She remembered their faces. And that's when she understood just how much trouble they were in. Reality was breaking. Rebecca pressed her face against the viewport and watched Antarctica flicker like a bad television signal. 1 second it was ice, white and endless. The next it was jungle, thick and green. Then desert. Then ocean. All of it happening at the same time, all of it wrong. What's happening to it? Kevin's voice was barely a whisper. The convergence doesn't destroy things, Nathan said. He was leaning against the wall, still weak from 5 years in suspended animation. It erases them. Makes them never have existed. What you're seeing is Earth trying to exist in multiple timelines at once. More tubes were shattering around them. Men and women stumbled out, coughing and gasping. They spoke in languages Rebecca had never heard, beautiful flowing words that sounded almost like music. Kara was shouting orders, trying to organize the chaos, but everyone was confused and scared. Rebecca grabbed Nathan's arm. You knew this would happen. You let yourself be frozen here for 5 years waiting for me. Why? His eyes held so much pain it hurt to look at him. Because in every timeline we've tried, you're the one who makes the choice. The only one who can save us. What choice? What are you talking about? An alarm screamed through the ship. Rebecca spun toward the viewports just in time to see a section of the hull cease to exist. Not explode. Not break. It simply wasn't there anymore. And the 3 people who'd been standing in that section were gone too. But here's the thing that made Rebecca's blood run cold. Nobody screamed. Nobody pointed. The crowd of awakened refugees just shifted to fill the empty space, continuing their conversations like nothing had happened. Rebecca looked at Kevin. Did you see that? Those 3 people? What 3 people? He looked at her like she was crazy. She turned to Kara. The woman with the red hair. The tall man. The kid who couldn't have been more than 20. Kara's face went pale. You remember them? Of course I remember them. They were just here. That's not possible. Kara wiped more blood from her nose. It was flowing steady now, dripping onto her strange clothes. When the convergence erases someone, they disappear from all memory. From all records. Like they never existed. Then why do I remember? Nathan pushed himself upright. Because you're an anchor point. A person whose consciousness exists at a precise intersection of time and choice. The convergence can't erase you without unraveling the entire causal chain that leads to its own creation. The ship's systems pulsed. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting. New corridors opened up that hadn't existed seconds before. One of them led to a chamber that made Rebecca's head hurt to look at. At the center of the room floated a sphere. But it wasn't a normal sphere. Its surface folded through angles that shouldn't exist, dimensions her eyes couldn't track. Looking at it was like trying to see in 4 directions at once. The temporal anchor, Nathan whispered. Our only weapon. Kara had followed them. She stood in the doorway, blood now streaming from both nostrils and one ear. It can lock a timeline in place. Prevent the convergence from rewriting reality. But it needs power we don't have and a sacrifice we can't make. What kind of sacrifice? Rebecca asked. Someone from this exact moment in time has to enter the anchor, Kara explained. Her voice was getting weaker. They have to relive their entire life, find the exact point where the chain of events begins. The moment that leads 50,000 years from now, to the creation of the thing that becomes the convergence. And then what? And then they have to change it. Prevent that moment from happening. Kara leaned against the doorway. But the cost is everything. That person gets erased from the timeline they just saved. No one remembers them. It's like they were never born. Kevin's face had gone white. That's murder. That's survival, Nathan said quietly. He pulled up a display from the wall, showing an image that made Rebecca's heart stop. It was her. Age 12. Standing at a middle school science fair holding a trophy. Beside her stood a boy with red hair and freckles, shy smile, eyes full of wonder. I remember that day, Rebecca breathed. That's Billy Thompson. We were friends for 1 year before his family moved to California. I never saw him again. William Thompson, Nathan said. In 43 years he's going to invent the entropy reversal machine. A device that prevents the heat death of the universe by consciously controlling thermodynamics. That sounds like a good thing. It would be, except conscious intervention in the fundamental forces of physics creates an equal and opposite reaction. The machine works. It saves the universe from heat death. But in doing so it creates something else. Directed entropy. Death with intelligence. Death with hunger. Kara took over. The machine gives birth to the convergence. An entity that exists at the end of time and works backward, erasing everything that ever was. We've been fighting it for 10,000 years, jumping backward through time, always one step ahead of annihilation. The ship lurched violently. Another section vanished. This time Rebecca watched a woman blink out of existence mid-sentence. The person she'd been talking to didn't even pause. Just turned and walked away, filling the conversation gap like it had never existed. But Rebecca remembered. A woman named Lisa. Short dark hair. Scared eyes. Gone. How many timelines have you tried? Rebecca asked. 217, Nathan said. In every single one, someone has to make this choice. And in every single one, they fail to find an alternative. You said I'm the one who makes the choice. Why me? Nathan stepped closer. His hands were shaking. Because William Thompson's path to physics started with those conversations you had as children. You made him believe impossible things were possible. You encouraged his curiosity about entropy, about death, about finding ways to cheat the end of everything. Rebecca's world tilted. So I have to go back and destroy our friendship? Turn him away from science. We thought so, Nathan said. But there might be another way. The ship's alarms intensified. Through the viewports, Earth had stopped flickering. It was settling into one state. A dead world. Lifeless gray rock. A planet where the conditions for life never formed. The convergence was choosing which version of reality to preserve. And it wasn't theirs. A new voice spoke from behind them. She doesn't have to destroy anything. Rebecca turned. One of the refugees had entered the chamber. A man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. He looked at Rebecca with recognition that made her skin crawl. My name is William Thompson. From Timeline 197. Rebecca's breath stopped. You're the boy from the photo? I was. Then I grew up and invented the machine. Then I watched it give birth to the convergence. Then I watched the convergence erase my entire world. He moved closer to the temporal anchor. I've made this journey myself, Rebecca. Tried every alternative. There's only one way. Tell me. You don't have to break 12-year-old me. You just have to tell me the truth. His eyes were wet with tears. Tell that boy that some questions shouldn't be answered. That preventing death isn't the same as honoring life. That the smartest thing a scientist can do is know when to stop. An explosion rocked the ship. Hayes and his soldiers had somehow gotten aboard. They were trying to breach the inner hull with C4, thinking the ship was the threat. They had no idea they were trying to stop humanity's only chance at survival. If I do this, Rebecca said slowly, what happens to me? You cease to exist in this timeline, Kara said. Blood was pouring from her nose now, pooling on the floor. The timeline resets. You live a different life. One where you never came to Antarctica. Never found this ship. Will I remember any of this? Fragments. Like fading dreams. Enough to carry the weight but not enough to explain it to anyone. Another section of the ship vanished. This time it took Kara with it. 1 second she was standing there, the next she was gone. The space filled with equipment, perfectly arranged as if she'd never existed. But Rebecca remembered. Kara. Dark skin, knowing eyes, warrior from the future. Gone. Nathan grabbed Rebecca's shoulders. We're out of time. The convergence is accelerating. In 10 minutes, this entire timeline will be erased. Rebecca looked at the temporal anchor, at the impossible sphere that could rewrite reality. At William Thompson, an old man who'd spent lifetimes trying to undo his greatest achievement. At Kevin, her friend who wouldn't even remember her name if she did this. Then she looked at Nathan. Really looked at him. Who are you? She asked. Really? His face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I'm your son. From a timeline you'll never have. I traveled back, became your mentor, guided your whole life toward this moment. His voice broke. And now I'm asking you to erase the future that creates me. Rebecca felt like someone had punched her in the chest. Nathan. I know. But someone has to make this choice. And it has to be you. She turned to the temporal anchor. Her hand reached out toward its impossible surface. And somewhere in the distance, reality screamed as it began to die. Rebecca's hand hovered inches from the temporal anchor. The sphere pulsed with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Looking at it too long made her eyes water and her head pound. Once you touch it, there's no going back, William Thompson said quietly. The old man stood beside her, this version of the boy she'd once known. You'll experience every moment of your life at the same time. Past, present, future, all happening at once. You need to find the thread that connects to me and follow it. How will I know which thread? You'll know. It'll burn brighter than the others. He smiled sadly. Our friendship mattered, Rebecca. Even if it has to be undone. Nathan stepped closer. Her son from a timeline that would never exist. In my world you were happy. You taught high school science. Had a husband who made you laugh. 2 kids who loved you. You never became famous, never made groundbreaking discoveries. But you were happy. If I was so happy, why did you leave? Because the convergence came. I watched it erase my father first. Then my sister. Then you. His voice cracked. You died not remembering you'd ever had children. And in that moment I would have done anything to save you. The refugees offered me a chance. Go back. Guide you. Give humanity another shot. The ship shuddered violently. Another section of hull vanished, taking 5 more people with it. Rebecca watched them blink out of existence. She was the only one who remembered their faces now. The only one who knew they'd been real. It's getting faster, Kevin said. He was at a control panel trying to make sense of the readings. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating. William pulled up a display on the wall. It showed Earth's timeline as a bright thread stretching from the distant past to the far future. But the thread was fraying at both ends, unraveling like old rope. The convergence exists at the end of time, he explained. It was born from my machine and now it's working backward, erasing history. Every person it takes, every moment it undoes, it gets stronger. Why? Rebecca asked. What does it want? It doesn't want anything. It just is. Like gravity or entropy. My machine tried to reverse the natural death of the universe, so reality created something to balance it out. Death with purpose. Death with direction. William's hands shook as he spoke. I thought I was saving everything. Instead, I doomed it all. Another alarm screamed. Hayes's voice crackled over the ship's speakers, somehow having tapped into the communication system. Whoever's controlling this vessel, you have 60 seconds to surrender before we blow the reactor core. They don't understand, Nathan said. They think we're the threat. Kevin ran to the viewport. I can see them. They've planted charges all over the lower decks. If those go off. It won't matter, Kara's voice said. Rebecca spun around. Kara was back, standing in the doorway like she'd never left. But something was wrong. She was translucent now, flickering like a hologram. You were erased, Rebecca breathed. I saw you disappear. I am. Kara smiled, sad and strange. But anchor points like you can see the ghosts of erased things. We're still here, Rebecca. Everyone the convergence took. We exist in the spaces between moments, in the memories of those who can still remember. She moved into the room, her form glitching and stuttering. You need to go now. Touch the anchor. Find the moment. Change it. Rebecca looked at her hands. They were shaking so hard she could barely control them. I don't know if I can do this. You can, Nathan said. I've watched you face impossible situations your whole life. This is just one more. This is different. This is asking me to unmake myself. No. William stepped forward. It's asking you to become something greater. Every person who's made this choice across 200 timelines, they live on in the reality they saved. Not in memory but in existence itself. The universe remembers even when people don't. An explosion rocked the ship. Hayes had set off one of his charges early. The hull screamed as metal tore. Refugees ran in panic, trying to find safety that didn't exist. 30 seconds, Kevin shouted over the chaos. Rebecca took a deep breath. She thought about her life. The good parts and the bad. Her parents who'd wanted her to be a doctor. Her failed engagement to a man who couldn't understand why she'd rather study ice than settle down. The cold nights in Antarctica, wondering if she'd wasted her potential on climate data nobody cared about. And she thought about Billy Thompson. A shy kid with red hair who'd shown her his quantum mechanics project and asked if she thought time travel was possible. Anything's possible, she told him. Science makes impossible things real. Those words had set him on a path that would end the universe. I'm ready, she said. She reached out and touched the temporal anchor. Reality exploded. Bang. Light. Sound. Everything at once. Rebecca's consciousness shattered into a million pieces and each piece was a moment from her life. She was 5 years old, catching fireflies in her backyard. She was 16, kissing a boy behind the gym. She was 23, defending her dissertation while her professor tore it apart. She was 31, standing on Antarctic ice, watching the sun set for the last time before winter darkness. All of it happening simultaneously. All of it real. All of it now. And through the chaos she saw the threads. Billions of them, connecting every moment to every other moment. Cause and effect stretching across decades. But one thread burned brighter than all the others. The science fair. Age 12. Billy Thompson. Rebecca grabbed the thread and let it pull her backward through time. The ship fell away. The convergence fell away. Everything fell away until there was only one moment, crystallized in time like a fly in amber. The middle school gymnasium materialized around her. She was 12 again, wearing the same dress she'd worn that day. Her project on thermodynamics sat on the table, diagrams and charts she'd worked on for months. And there was Billy, standing at the next table with his quantum mechanics display. Too advanced for his age. Too smart for his own good. Looking at her with those hopeful eyes. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. The judge was walking toward them. Miss Patterson, her 7th grade science teacher. In 10 seconds she'd stop at their tables. She'd praise their work. She'd suggest they collaborate. That collaboration would plant seeds that grew into friendship, into shared curiosity, into conversations about entropy and time and death. All Rebecca had to do was be cruel. Push Billy away. Make him doubt himself. Break his spirit before it could grow into the confidence that would one day build a machine to save the universe. She opened her mouth to do it. But Billy looked at her and smiled. Shy and genuine. Your project is really good, he said. The thermodynamic stuff. I don't really understand it, but it seems important. And Rebecca saw it. Saw all the futures branching from this moment. Saw Billy growing up to be a physicist. Saw him building the entropy machine. Saw the convergence being born. Saw timelines collapsing like dominoes. But she also saw another path. A narrower one. Harder to follow. Thanks, she heard herself say. Your quantum stuff is amazing too. You're going to do incredible things someday, Billy. His smile widened. You really think so? I know so. But I need you to promise me something. What? Rebecca knelt down so they were eye level. Someday when you're older you're going to face an impossible choice. A chance to save everything by breaking the rules of physics. A way to beat death itself. Billy's eyes went wide. How do you know that? Just promise me something. When that moment comes, remember this conversation. Remember that the smartest scientists aren't the ones who do everything they can. They're the ones who know when to stop. I don't understand. You will. She squeezed his shoulder. Some knowledge is too dangerous. Some questions shouldn't be answered. Not because we can't, but because we shouldn't. Can you remember that? Billy nodded slowly. I guess so. Miss Patterson arrived at their tables. Well. 2 impressive projects here. You two should work together sometime. And Rebecca heard herself say words that felt like dying. Actually, I think Billy and I should focus on our own work. We're interested in different things. She saw the hurt in Billy's eyes. Saw his smile fade. But she also saw something else. A seed of doubt. A question planted deep. A reminder that would grow over decades until the moment he stood before his completed entropy machine and chose not to turn it on. The timeline shuddered. Reality began to reset itself, rewriting around this new choice. And Rebecca felt herself coming apart. Erased from the edges inward, unmade one memory at a time. The last thing she saw was Nathan standing in the space between timelines. He was smiling at her. Mouthing words she couldn't hear but somehow understood. Thank you, Mom. I love you. Then everything went white. Rebecca jerked awake at her desk, heart hammering against her ribs. Papers scattered as her arm knocked into them. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and real and impossible. She looked around, trying to catch her breath. This was her office. Her books lined the shelves. Her diplomas hung on the wall. Everything exactly where it should be. But wrong. All of it wrong. She grabbed her nameplate from the desk. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, Professor of Theoretical Physics and Ethics. Ethics? She didn't teach ethics. She taught climate science. She'd been in Antarctica. She'd found a ship buried in the ice. She'd met people from the future. She'd touched something called the temporal anchor and the memories scattered like smoke. The harder she tried to hold on to them, the faster they slipped away. Dreams. They had to be dreams. But her hands were shaking. And she knew deep in her bones that something had happened. Something important. Something she desperately needed to remember. A knock at the door made her jump. Rebecca? You okay in there? She looked up. A man stood in the doorway. Silver hair, kind eyes, maybe 60 years old. She knew him. Professor William Thompson. Her colleague. They'd worked together for years. But for just a second she saw something else. A 12-year-old boy with red hair and freckles. A science fair. A choice that saved the world. Then it was gone. Yeah, she managed. Just dozed off. Weird dreams. William stepped into the office and something in his expression made her pause. He was looking at her like he knew something. Like he was waiting for her to remember. Dreams about Antarctica? He asked quietly. Her blood went cold. How did you know that? Lucky guess. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I get them too sometimes. Dreams about ships and ice and choices that unmake the world. He paused. But they're just dreams, right? Rebecca couldn't speak. She stared at him, and for a moment, the air between them felt heavy with things neither could say. William cleared his throat. Anyway, I wanted your opinion on something. Student paper. He handed her a folder. Brilliant kid. Proposing a theoretical machine that could reverse entropy on a universal scale. Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The equations swam before her eyes. She didn't understand why, but looking at them made her want to cry. What do you think? William asked. She grabbed a pen. Her hand moved almost on its own, writing words she didn't know she knew. While theoretically sound, the student must consider unintended consequences. Conscious intervention in fundamental thermodynamics could create unforeseen reactions. Recommend focusing on sustainable approaches rather than attempting to reverse natural processes. William read over her shoulder. His breath caught. That's exactly what you told me. What? When we were 12. At the science fair. I had this whole project about quantum mechanics and entropy. You told me some knowledge was too dangerous. That the smartest scientists know when to stop. He looked at her with eyes full of something that might have been tears. Changed my whole life. Made me study ethics instead of just chasing theories. Rebecca's heart was racing. Fragments were coming back now. Not memories exactly. More like echoes. A ship rising through ice. A woman named Kara. A man who called himself her son. I don't remember that, she whispered. Neither did I. Not for years. William sat down across from her. But lately I've been having these dreams. About futures that didn't happen. About choices that unmade themselves. About a woman who sacrificed everything to save a world that wouldn't remember her name. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, students crossed the campus quad. Cars honked in the distance. The world turned, normal and beautiful and completely unaware of how close it had come to never existing. Rebecca's computer dinged. An email from Kevin Brooks. She frowned. Kevin. Why did that name make her chest hurt? The email was simple. Coffee this week? Been too long since we caught up. She didn't remember knowing anyone named Kevin. But she found herself typing back, I'd love that. Another knock at the door. A student peeked in, nervous and excited. Professor Walsh? I had some questions about your lecture on scientific responsibility. Come in, Rebecca said. As the student sat down, asking about the ethics of pursuing knowledge without considering consequences, Rebecca felt herself settling into a conversation that felt both new and ancient. Like she'd had this talk 1,000 times before. The student left 20 minutes later, thoughtful and quiet. William was still there watching her. You're good at this, he said. Teaching people to think before they act. To consider the weight of their choices. It feels important, Rebecca said. I don't know why, but it does. William stood to leave. At the door he paused. Rebecca, can I ask you something strange? Sure. Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? Like there's another version of you out there who made different choices? Rebecca thought about Antarctica. About ice cores and climate data and a life spent in the cold. A life that felt real even though she'd never lived it. Sometimes, she admitted. But I think maybe we all have lives we didn't live. Choices we didn't make. And maybe that's okay. William nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe those other lives are still out there somehow. In the spaces between moments. In the memories of a universe that never forgets. He left and Rebecca sat alone in her office. She pulled up her calendar. Classes to teach. Papers to grade. A department meeting about ethics and artificial intelligence research. A normal life. A good life. But as she worked, she kept glancing at the window. At the sky. Like she was waiting for something. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood at her apartment window watching snow fall over the city. Fat flakes drifting down, covering everything in white. Beautiful and cold and somehow familiar. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass. And for just a second she saw someone else. A younger woman in cold weather gear, standing on Antarctic ice, watching a ship rise into the sky. Then it was gone. Rebecca pressed her hand to the cold window. Somewhere in her mind she heard a voice. Nathan's voice, though she didn't know anyone named Nathan. The convergence still exists at the end of time. But you bought us 50,000 years. Others will make the same choice in other timelines. The war continues. Thank you. A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't know why she was crying. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Angela Martinez. We met at that conference last year. Want to grab lunch next week? Angela. Another name that made her heart ache for reasons she couldn't explain. Sure, she typed back. I'd like that. As the snow continued to fall, Rebecca felt something shift inside her. Not a memory. More like a knowing. A bone-deep certainty that she'd done something important. Something that mattered. She thought about William's question. About other lives, other choices. And she thought about a boy with red hair who'd grown up to study ethics instead of entropy. Who'd spent his life teaching restraint instead of pursuing power. Who'd never built a machine that would end the universe. All because of one conversation at a science fair. All because someone had chosen to save the world by erasing themselves from it. Rebecca smiled. She didn't know why. But standing there in the falling snow, she felt at peace. Somewhere beneath Antarctic ice, did a ship sleep? Did refugees dream in their crystal tubes, waiting for a future that would never need them? Did they remember a woman who'd stood between humanity and annihilation? The universe remembered. Rebecca was sure of that. Even if people didn't. Even if she didn't. She whispered to the falling snow, to the night, to the timeline she'd saved. I'd do it again. And somewhere in the quantum foam where possibility lived, where erased timelines left shadows, something heard her. Something remembered. Something new. The snow fell. Each flake unique. Each one a choice made. Each one a sacrifice offered. Each one a moment preserved. Rebecca Walsh went to bed that night and dreamed of ice and ships and a son she'd never had telling her he loved her. When she woke, the dreams faded like they always did. But the feeling remained. She got up. Made coffee. Checked her email. Prepared for another day of teaching students to think before they acted. To consider consequences. To know when to stop. A normal day. A good day. The world turned, unaware and safe, held together by choices nobody remembered and sacrifices nobody knew had been made. And that was exactly how it should be. In her morning class, a student raised their hand. Professor Walsh, if you could change one moment in history, would you? Rebecca thought about it. Really thought about it. No, she said finally. Because every moment, even the painful ones, makes us who we are. And sometimes the hardest choices create the most beautiful futures. The student nodded, satisfied. Rebecca smiled and continued teaching, carrying inside her a truth she could never speak. That she had changed history. That she had stood at the end of everything and chosen love over existence. That somewhere in the fabric of reality she was remembered. And that was enough. The universe held its breath and moved forward. One moment at a time. One choice at a time. One act of quiet courage at a time. And in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quantum foam where erased things leave echoes, Rebecca Walsh existed in every timeline she'd saved. Forever the woman who gave up everything. Forever the anchor that held reality in place. Forever remembered by a universe that never forgets. The snow continued to fall outside her window, and the world kept turning. Safe.